Welcome to our kitchen. Today we prepare an ancient Roman recipe that usually we don't associate with the ancient Mediterranean cultures. Pasta with spicy and aromatic meatballs. We start with the ingredients. We need white wheat flour, pork tenderloin, leeks, grapes, garum, olive oil, raisin wine, white wine, and the spices, black pepper, lovage, bay laurel berries, and asafoetida. Then the fresh herbs, oregano and rue. First, we prepare the dough with white wheat flour, salt, and warm water. This recipe is part of the cookbook conventionally attributed to Apicius. The author doesn't write how to make pasta. We find a description of pasta, called Tracta in Latin, in Cato Agricultural Treatise. It's a simple sheet of pasta made with water and flour. Cato specifies to use siligo, first quality white wheat flour. We already used the Tracta of Cato when we made the placenta, an ancient Roman sweet. You find the link in the description below. We roll the dough into small round sheets. The author in these and other recipes provides a description of the shape of the Tracta uses. Small round sheets. He uses the Tracta in several recipes, mainly in the dishes he calls Minutalia, in which pasta is served with fish or meat. It's interesting to note that in 7 out of 8 Minutal recipes, the Tracta is served with meatballs or fish cakes, called in Latin with the same name, isicia. The author always uses dry Tracta and breaks it into smaller pieces before cooking it. We suggest leaving the Tracta to dry at least overnight. For the meatballs we chose pork tenderloin. The author doesn't tell us what meat to use, but in another passage of the cookbook we find a list of the meats used for meatballs: peacock, pheasant, rabbit, chicken and pork. And in other recipes it specifies to use lean meat. Then we pound the minced meat in the mortar. These meatballs are called isicia terentina. The author doesn't provide the recipe, but in another passage of the cookbook we find the ingredients of a Terentinum filling that we'll use for these meatballs. Terentinum, a word that in this cookbook refers to different kinds of preparations, such as meatballs and sauces, is always associated with pork recipes, and in one case with a boar ham. We grind in the mortar 1 bay laurel berry and black pepper. In ancient Roman cuisine, we often find bay laurel leaves and berries. We use bay laurel berries also to prepare the lucanica, an ancient Roman sausage we made a few months ago. You find the link to the recipe in the description below. Bay laurel berries were used also to flavor wine and make bay laurel oil. Then we mince the roux. Roux was widely used in ancient Roman recipes. Its aromatic and slightly bitter taste is difficult to substitute. If you don't find the roux, you can use another aromatic herb such as mint. Now we prepare the carenum. First, we destem and crush the grapes. Carenum is a kind of concentrated grape must that ancient Roman cooks bought already prepared. Then we boil the grape juice until it reduces by 1/3. Concentrated must was a common sweetener. Palladius, in his agronomy treatise, reports that carenum was reduced by 1/3. It provides also the description of the frutum and sapa, must reduced to half and to 1/3. The slight sweetness of carenum is perfect to balance the bitterness of roux and the saltiness of garum. Now we mix the pork tenderloin with the spices roux, garum, a bit of carenum, olive oil, and grate a bit of asafoetida. Asafoetida was widely used in the ancient Mediterranean. Romans called it laser, or with the Greek name silphium. The most prized variety, called Laser cyrenaicum, was imported from Cyrene in North Africa, and it is no longer produced today. The eastern variety, called Laser particum, is still widely used in many eastern countries. We shape the meatballs. The author writes that the meatballs must be small. He repeats this in all his pasta recipes, but he takes for granted the shape of the isicha. We suppose they could be round, because of the recipes in which they are used. Isicha are often mixed with other ingredients, and an elongated or flat shape can more easily break. Then we mince the leeks. Ancient Romans had at disposal two differently shaped leeks, called porrum sectivum and porrum capitatum. The first was white and elongated, similar to the kinds we cultivate today. Porrum capitatum instead is a leek with a big head. Pliny describes the agricultural technique to obtain porrum capitatum from the regular leek plants. We add in a pan olive oil, a bit of garum, a good amount of water, and the leeks. Water is important because we will use it to cook not only the meatballs but also the tracta. We suggest keeping a pan with boiling water to add it if necessary. When the water starts to boil, we add the meatballs. We'll also add garum later, so use just a bit of garum now, or the dish will become too salty. Keeping in mind that water will be almost entirely absorbed by the pasta during the cooking. Garum was a fish sauce used by all the ancient Mediterranean populations, in particular by Phoenicians, Greeks and Romans. It was made with fish and salt, sometimes with the addition of spices and herbs. You can substitute it with a Southeast Asian fish sauce, prepared in the same way as many kinds of garum, or just with a pinch of salt. Meanwhile, we prepare the sauce. We grind the black pepper and lovage. Pay attention not to add an excessive quantity of these two spices if you don't like really spicy dishes. Lovage enhances a lot the spiciness of pepper. Indeed, this is the second time we add pepper. The third will be on the finished dish. We mince the oregano. You can use it fresh or dry. We mix the spices and oregano and a bit of garum, white wine and raisin wine. Raisin wine in this case is used as a mild sweetener to balance the sauce, preventing it from becoming salty and spicy. We add the sauce to the meatballs. The author tells us that the meatballs must be cooked until tender. The cooking time changes depending on the size of the meatballs and the cut you choose. We cooked ours for about 10 minutes, and then for another 10 minutes with the pasta. As soon as it starts to boil again, we add the Tracta, breaking it with our hands. We cooked the Tracta for about 10 minutes, stirring it often to prevent it from sticking to the pan. The cooking time changes depending on how hard is the dough, how thin are the sheets, and also how dry is the Tracta. The Tracta will absorb a lot of liquids, so at this point you need a good amount of water in the pan. All the liquids must be absorbed when the pasta is cooked and ready to serve. This technique is quite different from how pasta is cooked today in Italy. The aim is to make the pasta absorb all the flavor from the sauce and the meatballs. Now we grind a bit of black pepper. We serve the Tracta with the ziccia, sprinkling a little black pepper. This flavorful pasta is the perfect way to taste a Welsh romance prepared at their Minutal for a convivium, and a different method to prepare one of the most famous Italian dishes. If you're interested in ancient foods and flavors, or you're just looking for unusual and delicious recipes, please subscribe our channel.